On this day in history, July 27th, 1214, the Battle of Bouvines is fought, in which Philip II of France decisively defeats Imperial, English, and Flemish armies, effectively ending John of England's Angevin Empire. Included in the following is an excerpt from the 1944 edition of the Encyclopaedia Britannica going over the history of the village. Bouvines, a village on the French-Belgian frontier, population from 1936, 537. Between Lille and Tournai, the scene of one of the greatest battles of the Middle Ages, fought July 27, 1214, between the forces of Philip Augustus, King of France, and those of the coalition formed against him, of which the principal members were the Emperor and King John of England. The plan of the campaign was designed by King John to draw the French king south towards the Loire against himself, while his nephew, the Emperor Otto IV, the princes of the Netherlands, and the main army of the Allies should, at the right moment, march upon Paris from the north. John's part in the general strategy was perfectly executed. The Allies in the north moved tardily, while John, after 2 inroads, turned back to his Guienne possessions on July 3rd. It was not until 3 weeks later that the Emperor concentrated his forces at Valenciennes, and in the interval Philip Augustus had countermarched northward and concentrated an army at Peronne. Philip then took the offensive himself, and in maneuvering to get a good cavalry ground upon which to fight, he offered battle, July 27th, on the plain east of Bouvines and the river Marque. The same plain on which in 1794 the brilliant cavalry action of Willems was fought. He had a superiority in cavalry to compensate his decidedly smaller numbers of foot. The Imperial army accepted the challenge and drew up facing southwestward towards Bouvines, the heavy cavalry on the wings, the infantry in one great mass in the center, supported by the cavalry corps under the Emperor himself. The French army took ground exactly opposite to the enemy, and in a similar formation, cavalry on the wings, infantry, including the Milice des Communes, in the center, Philip with his own knights in rear of the foot. The battle opened with a confused cavalry fight on the French right, in which individual feats of knightly gallantry were more noticeable than any attempt at combined action. The fighting was more serious between the two centers. The Flemish infantry, who were, at that time, almost the best in existence, drove in the French. Philip led the center body of cavalry to retrieve the day, and after a long and doubtful fight, in which he himself was unhorsed and narrowly escaped death, began to drive back the Flemings. In the meanwhile, the French feudatories on the left wing had thoroughly defeated the Imperialists opposed to them, and William Longsword, Earl of Salisbury, the leader of this corps, was unhorsed and taken prisoner by the warlike Bishop of Beauvais. Victory declared itself also on the other wing, where the French at last routed the Flemish cavalry and captured Count Ferdinand of Flanders, one of the leaders of the coalition. In the center, the battle was between the two mounted reserves led respectively by the king and the emperor in person. Here, too, the imperial forces suffered defeat, Otto himself being saved only by the devotion of a handful of Saxon knights. The day was already decided in favor of the French when their wings began to close inwards to cut off the retreat of the imperial center. The battle closed with the celebrated stand of Reginald of Bouillon, a revolted vassal of King Philip, who formed a ring of 700 Barbacans pikemen, and not only defied every attack of the French cavalry, but himself made repeated charges or sorties with his small force of knights. Eventually, and long after the Imperial army had begun its retreat, the gallant Chiltern was ridden and annihilated by a charge of 3,000 men-at-arms. Reginald was taken prisoner in the melee, and the prisoners also included 2 other counts, Ferdinand and William Longsword, 25 barons, and over 100 knights. The killed amounted to about 170 knights of the defeated party, and many thousands of foot on either side, of whom no accurate account can be given. The battle is characteristic of normal medieval warfare, the center and 2 wings fighting their separate battle, without guiding idea or superior guidance. Only Reginald, in basing his mobile action on a stable infantry pivot, showed a glimmer of tactical sense.